our stories in our minds follow our state. Now, we all know this because you've seen how our thoughts change with our state. So if I am in a calm, alive state, I will have thoughts that represent calm aliveness, like, oh, look at the beautiful day outside. It's good to
Yeah.
be alive. Isn't that interesting? Let me shift my state and the
Yeah.
story will change with it. Sometimes, oftentimes, that is the easier thing to start with. Welcome to this episode of the Biology of Trauma podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Amy. Jodi's 12-year-old son suddenly died in a car accident. Grief consumed her, but she had a 14-year-old daughter who said, "Mom, I'm afraid you're going to change. I need you to be here. I need you to be the same." Today, Jodi shares one of the most powerful tools that she discovered that helped her to feel and grieve and be present through that process. She's going to cover the science of why smell is our most direct pathway to our autonomic nervous system, how we can use essential oils to titrate our emotions, how rose essential oil can specifically counteract our fear response, and the biology of letting go, how to make it safe enough to feel, to grieve without needing to numb. Welcome, Jodi. I'm so excited to have you here. I'm so excited for you to learn from Jodi and the science of the nervous system and all that is possible for us to actually make a difference and not just get stuck with our dysregulated nervous system the way it is. We have so many tools. And again, like knowing the science gives me hope.
Thank you. And I feel like I should give context to that. 7 years ago, August 27th, 2018, my 12-year-old son was killed in a car accident. And it was the hardest, well, it was kind of the beginning of an ongoing hard thing, because what I will say is that it is an everyday choice. My daughter was 14 at the time. It was the week before she was about to start high school. All these people came over to our house and felt the need to tell her that I was never going to be the same. Her father was the driver. Her son's best friends were all in the accident. Her best friend had just moved to a different state. And she basically said to me, "I kind of need you to be the same because you're all I have." And I knew enough about adverse childhood experiences to know that she was right, to know that you needed that advocate. And so my higher why was kind of, I have no idea what I'm doing. There does not seem to be a roadmap, but I need to figure this out. And so I embarked on this like daily. It's still ongoing trial and error of this helps, this hurts. And I mean, to be super honest, I got to, today was her first day of her senior year in college. I took her to the airport yesterday and I woke up today so sad. And I was like, wow, this is one of those days, but I know what I need to do. I know that I really don't feel like leaving the house and going to yoga, but when I do, I feel better. I know that when I smell things, I feel better. And so it's not, I guess what I want to say is it's not like I'm fixed or I found this thing. It's that every day I live with chronic pain, I live with hard things, and every day I make a choice to deal with it and to just kind of lean into the tools that work.
Thank you for bringing that in, Jodi. This idea of being able to be intentional, because so much of this is a choice. When we can be intentional and deliberate about what we're bringing in to our body and inside of our body, then it allows us to have more agency and more direction in our healing journey rather than just waiting for things to happen to us. Now, there is this saying that says, "Stop and smell the roses." We talk a lot about pausing. So I can understand the stop part of that. Stop and smell the roses. We've got the pausing part. But let's now go into why smell the roses. What is it about smell specifically that is a direct message to our nervous system?
Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, this is a funny story. My daughter in her 9th grade year, they had to find a Nobel laureate. And so she found one where we're based in Seattle, a Seattle-based woman named Linda Buck, who was an olfactory researcher. And she won a Nobel Prize because she was researching kind of the olfactory receptors that responded to predator odor. What people forget is smell of the five senses is the most critical to survival. because you smell food, you smell water, you smell predator odor, you smell fire. It alerts you to danger. And it's so correlated with your limbic system because what happens is you smell something positive and then the limbic system encodes that memory. Oh, good thing. Keep this. This is why, like, we all have that smell that takes us back to childhood. Mine, embarrassingly, is mothballs. It reminds me of my grandparents' apartment. And the reason is because there's something encoded that it's good, right? And now for a lot of the people that survived the fires in California, now they smell fire and they have a different reaction, And so now that brings up a correlation. But what's really interesting is that Linda Buck found that olfactory receptors that were correlated with predator odor could be over the solution to that fear response is the smell of rose. Rose essential oil roses kind of counteracted that fear response. And I feel like plants and oils can be used in such a powerful way. Of the five senses, I feel like smell is the most powerful and the most underutilized, especially for embodiment. Because when we're having that kind of thought loop, that hypervigilant response, smell is the best way to shift gears because it gets us into that limbic system space and it can regulate that limbic system.
And I want to give some additional elements to why this is so important, what you're sharing. Our stories in our minds follow our state. Now, we all know this because you've seen how our thoughts change with our state. So if I am in a calm, alive state, I will have thoughts that represent calm aliveness, like, oh, look at the beautiful day outside. It's good to be alive. If you are in the stress state, your thoughts and your stories go to, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be okay. This is a lot, like all that spiraling. If you're in the overwhelmed state, that's where your stories go. They go to that place of, it's hopeless. I'm hopeless. And it's all doom and gloom. And so to realize that we have tools that will shift our state, that we don't do all the focus on the stories and the thoughts. We can say, oh, isn't that interesting? Let me shift my state and the story will change with it. Sometimes, oftentimes, that is the easier thing to start with. And we know that we need easy in order to really be able to form new habits of being in a different state. So when we are noticing, oh, my state, my inner state is in one of those survival places, it doesn't need to be there right now. What if I could use my sense of smell and that be the place where I can start right now? That feels easy to just grab this essential oil, for example, just grab this. And then this is the easy first step and everything else can follow.
That's how I started. So my background, my ex-husband was bipolar. And he was very depressed for a very long time. And at one point he attempted suicide. I found him, I saved him. I was then trying to figure out how do I keep doing this? It was just a lot. And ultimately wound up moving him to a residential treatment facility. And once I knew that he was safe and it wasn't my job to keep him safe, it was like I crossed the finish line for a 10-year marathon and I could barely function and barely get out of bed. And I knew enough. I was supporting my adrenals. I was trying to do all the right things. But I finally realized it was my nervous system, that I was just so sympathetic dominant. And so I started playing with ways to stimulate my nervous system and created, this was our first blend. It was Parasympathetic. It's clove and lime. And you literally topically apply it behind the earlobe on the mastoid bone, where the vagus nerve is the most accessible to the surface. And once I kind of figured this out and started working with women, you always tend to attract yourself, right? So I was getting these women in their 40s who were like doing everything right. And they were smart enough and organized enough to like really dial in their protocol. And yet there was witching hour. Every night when they were making dinner, invariably, the phone would be ringing and the mother-in-law would have a problem. The husband would come home and need their help finding something. The baby would be crying, the dog would be barking, the dinner would be burning. And it didn't matter that they did everything right. They were just flooded. And even though they knew to do deep breathing, all these things went out the window because it was just too overwhelming. And so to Amy's point, I'm like, what can they actually do? They can smell something. They can keep this in their pocket. They can smell something. And you know what? Every single one of them told me, I actually do that. We all have our supplement graveyards. The supplements that we don't ingest are not necessarily going to help us. We actually need tools. It's not necessarily the best tool. There are so many tools, but this is the easiest. It's the most accessible. And it winds up being a bit Pavlovian. What's interesting is that when you're flooded, it turns off your access to your prefrontal cortex, which is kind of your problem solving skill. And so you need to regulate your nervous system so that you can problem solve. You can't, when you're overwhelmed and flooded and your back is against the wall, you can't make a decision. And honestly, you shouldn't. That is not when you're supposed to have your deep conversation with your partner. Like, you need to regulate before you can think clearly.
Creating the space between the stimulus and my reaction. Until we have that space, we're going to continue to just react from default and from a place of fear and survival rather than who do I really want to be right now in this moment. So tell us about smell and sleep. Why would creating intentional use of smell around bedtime actually be helpful, since many people have sleep issues?
What's really interesting? People kind of forget. They think that medicine is only pills, right? And they forget that pharmaceutical drugs were actually derived from plants, right? Valerian root is now Valium. White willow bark is now aspirin. Lavender has all these relaxing effects. And if you think about what is it that causes the oil in the plants, it's the secondary metabolite, which is what kind of allows these plants to survive. And so they have medicinal properties in us. Oils are really just the concentrated essence of plants. You go and you pick, it's farm to table, the lavender at the freshest, you put it in the big metal vat. You're not going to fill it with water because that could be damaging. You boil the water elsewhere and just put the steam through so that the steam actually lifts the oil off. And then you get the water, the hot water with the oil, cool it. Oil and water don't mix. So you get the actual oil, which is the concentrated essence, which is the highly healing component. And so when you use oils, it's really like a messenger to your body. It's really helpful. Oils are not going to make you too hot or too cold. They're not necessarily moving the needle in that way. What they're doing is they're saying, oh, you're too hot. We're going to bring you back to normal. Oh, you're too cold. We're going to bring you back to normal, to baseline. I think they're adaptogenic, and I hope they help return you to homeostasis. So it's not like it's really, basically what it does is it tunes your body into nature and to the natural, like, light darkness rhythm called the circadian rhythm. And so when you're in balance and it's nighttime, your body can recognize, oh, it's getting darker. Oh, it's time to release melatonin. It's just kind of putting you back in balance so that your body can do what it's supposed to naturally do.
Now, I know many people who, when they go to bed, that's the only moment all day that they've had stillness, that they've had quiet, and that they actually have to be with themselves before they can fall asleep, which then drives them to use things like Valium, for example, because they don't want to be with themselves and they're trying to just force sleep to come as quickly as possible. So this moment then where, whether we like it or not, we are stuck with ourselves and all of the feelings that come up because we're not doing anything. We're not running around and trying to stay busy. We're trying to relax. And yet the relaxing is what then brings up all of the grief and the anger and the feelings that we haven't wanted to feel all day or all our life. So how can we use smell to actually make it safer to allow the opening up and the letting go of these stored emotions?
This is actually, it's funny because this is my whole purpose, is this idea of how do you transmute without re-traumatizing, right? And rose is one of them. And I put rose on the heart. We have a blend called lung support because in Chinese medicine, the lungs are correlated with grief. That really helps. I'm going to start talking about this publicly, but when Max died, it's so interesting. I woke up and it was almost like I had a Charlie horse in my heart. Like my heart had never hurt in that way before. And, for anyone who's had a Charlie horse, what do? It kills and you get up and you like stand on your leg and it suddenly passes. It was rose and it was lung support. I had made these blends because I kind of knew they worked. And then all of a sudden I'm so in it and I'm like, wow, they really do work. So that helps kind of calm the heart. We have a heart blend too, which puts the heart into coherence. And then I actually fell into dorsal vagal. So my ex-husband was the driver in the car accident. He wound up going to prison and I disassociated while he was in prison. I became a workaholic. I got all these things done so that I did, because the feelings were too intense. And I think there is a role for disassociation in certain times. And then suddenly he got out of prison and he showed up at my house. And I was like, I have no idea how angry I am. Like all of a sudden it was like drinking from a fire hose. Like the feelings were so intense. And then I am not a procrastinator. I do not like scroll on my phone. Suddenly like Instagram is so much more interesting. And I'm like, wow, okay, I'm Dorsal Vagal. So I started playing with what are some oils that I can use to basically put my brain and my limbic system into kind of neutral, into that place where I can recognize that I'm feeling this, but I don't have to relive it and re-experience it. And to be like super candid and honest, it's still hard. Even if you weightlift every day and you go to the gym, like it's still hard. You know how to do it, but it doesn't make it lightweight. And so
This is bringing up so much for me and my current surprise at some of the grief that's been surfacing for me. And I'll share briefly with you because it's so parallel to your story, Jodi, that as I'm in my book launch in this time of big celebration and expansion, I've had more grief coming up over my son. So I was a parent for 6 years, and it is nothing compared to your story, Jodi. Absolutely nothing compared. And I have been experiencing a renewal and I would say a deeper grief with no longer being my son's forever mother, like I thought I would be, with the book coming out. I have all sorts of stories that my brain is making up for why. I think that there's an element of this book was inspired by my experience with him, and I want him in my life. I still want that relationship with him that I can't have. And as I've been noticing that parallel of celebration, expansion, and this different feel to the same grief, but it feels different and on a new level, then I've been noticing how much more helpful it's been to have essential oils around me. And I definitely have been using your parasympathetic blend. I've got it on my desk, in fact, because when I will notice that I will have that. Here's my grief, and it's stored somewhere inside my heart and my gut and all these places. And then I'll accidentally bump it. It'll get poked. Someone will say something, or someone will ask me something in a podcast interview, and I'll feel that poke. And rather than get derailed, rather than allow myself to fall all the way down into that spiral of all of that grief and that loss and what will never be, I'm able to keep myself safe enough. It's just I'm safe enough right now that I'm not needing to pack it and store it, but I'm also able to feel it and move through it because I have something immediately with me that no one else even has to notice, right? Like they don't notice that I'm putting on an essential oil.
no, you're totally right. I have found that the happy moments are hard because Max isn't there to celebrate it with me. And I've also noticed like milestones. He would have been 19. And last year, all his friends graduated high school. And I run into them and it's this weird, it's so mixed because it's so fun to see like these little pipsqueaks that are like taller than me, that have facial hair and like what they're doing. But at the same time, it's a sadness. And so what I have been able to do, I find a way, I almost call it like driving in neutral. Like I'm able to observe and recognize and take it in and not be reactive in that moment. And let's be honest, their movement helps me. There are times when I will walk or I will do yoga and I will cry and I will let it go. Epsom salt bath is my other favorite. Like a place where I can just dump all my feelings.
That for me has been as well, like water, movement, and then surrounding myself with intentional cues of safety from plants in my home, making sure that I'm surrounded by things that are bringing me that sense of like, it's neutral. It's not necessarily bringing me this like intense joy because that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that regulated, grounded, I can be present in this and not need to numb myself.
Yes. Yes. And that is huge. It's so funny. I don't think I realized as a lifetime overachiever, that is such a form of numbing. Like all of the things that people are like, shut up, you're such a workaholic, you're such an exercise freak. Yeah, I was the queen of numb and I didn't even know.
Amazing. Coming back to this idea of making it safe to let go. There are so many people that I have spoken to, and they have said something to the equivalent of, well, now's not the right time for me to do this nervous system work because I need to stay organized. I need to be able to keep functioning, and I would fall apart if I let myself open up and feel. And so it's not the opening up, it's creating the safety to open up.
Hard to create space. Think about rigidity, right? We're so clenched. We're holding on so tight because we have this idea that this control keeps us safe, and to loosen our grasp a little bit, to let anything in, that feels dangerous. But what if that is not true? What if what we're letting in is actually really good? And so it doesn't need to be this all or nothing, like the timing needs to be perfect, the stars need to align. No, you can let a little bit in every day. And that's where smells really good. You can, it's like you don't need to go run a marathon. You can walk for 5 minutes, just find a little space to let that time in.
I just thought of this is that smell is something that we can also use to titrate our experience of emotions.
That's exactly what it is. And that's really what I think is so powerful, because for some people, I'll use myself as an example. It's hard. Feeling your feelings is so not fun. It's almost overwhelming. It feels like a tidal wave. And so to be able to do it for a little small amount and then do the next thing, that is what I do sometimes. I'll set the timer. And sometimes it's literally 30 seconds. And I'm like, all right, I did it. I'm good. The cold plunge. I'm in, I'm out. We're good.
When people are starting my 21-day journey, that's often where we have to start, is micro moments of just connection with the body, because longer than a few seconds. And they're like, whoa, this is too much feeling my body. I've never been in my body for this long and I don't like it. Can I get out of here? And we've got to actually practice. And we practice by just doing it very small moments at a time. And then just that repetition builds our ability to stay connected. And then the next week we can do a whole minute. And then the next week after that, maybe it's 2 minutes. But this idea that we really can meet our body, our nervous system where it's at, and then build that sense of safety through the practice and through the titration, so that we're not bulldozing in and creating a scenario of too much too fast, even in the process of trying to do something good and helpful.
Yes, that's exactly what I think, and exactly what I tell people. It's funny because people, whatever, they'll buy parasympathetic and they're like, how much do I use it? And I'm like, let's start really slowly. Let's just smell it at first and smell it for a week, and then just once a day. Because what happens and what people don't realize is if you've been sympathetic dominant, fight or flight for so long, the minute you're safe, it's what has been on hold while you've been in fight or flight? Oh gosh, you're detoxifying. Suddenly your body is like, "Ooh, we can dump the toxins." And if your lymphatic system is congested, all of a sudden you don't feel so great. So we really want to go slow and measured and all of those things to make sure that we're opening all the doors for everything to return to balance. Think of our senses, right? We have 5 that we know about, more, I believe, that are available. We can use our sense of hearing. We can use our vision. There are so many ways, so many paths to embodiment. This is just one option. And if it makes you feel more anxious, then it's probably not for you. But if it calms you down, then maybe it is.
So Jodi, let's talk about those people who find themselves more in that dorsal vagal shutdown. They're no longer in the sympathetic even. They're just in that heaviness, low place. Everything feels overwhelming. They don't even want to do anything because they don't feel that they're worth it anymore. That's how low that they've gone into their freeze and their shutdown response. What are some of the things that have been helpful for you when you found yourself in those places?
I actually created one called Limbic Reset, and I tend to start with a lot of research. It's so interesting. There is tons of research that certain oils that are high in this constituent sesquiterpene are really good for crossing the blood-brain barrier, kind of bringing in more oxygen, and just basically, I believe it's all about creating space, right? Giving more space for things that might not serve you anymore to just gently transmute, and for things that are waiting to help you to come in. I love Limbic Reset for that. I have one called Fascia Release that's honestly my favorite ever, because I mentioned that I ran marathons. I did everything I could to not have to feel a thing. And guess what? Now I'm 56 and it's caught up to me a little bit. So my knees are super fun. My hips are fun. This is my favorite thing. I could bathe in it. I put it on all the time. I really do feel like I'm Benjamin Buttoning a little bit. Like, I love to hike uphills, easy for me. Downhill, I am glacial. I walk so slowly, but not now. Like, now I can kind of keep up. So that's another one. And then it's interesting. A lot of practitioners use our oils. And so we have one called intestinal mucosa that's really designed to kind of align the gut. And one of my favorite practitioner says that she really uses that. She thinks the vagus nerve is kind of top down, sending the signal from the brain to the body. She finds that when people are dorsal vagal, this is a really good one to get them into their body. And she basically has them put it around their small intestine. And it's definitely helpful for digestion and nutrient absorption, but I found that really interesting. That's how she uses it.
To your point, Jodi, what we know of the science of smell is that when we saturate it, we actually lose the potency, we lose the effectiveness. And so we
Yes.
don't want to create so much that then our system's like, yeah, that's not even going to work anymore because it's been too much. It's that Goldilocks effect. It's just the right amount. And when it is just the right amount, it will continue to work for us rather than just be something that our nervous system is like, yeah, no, we're so done with that because it was overdone before.
It is Goldilocks. And it's funny, like I always use the example, we just got back from Europe where you get the breakfast with the buffet. And every day, this friend on the trip, like she never ate everything on her plate. Like, I don't know how hungry she thought she was going to be, but it was kind of ridiculous. And I feel like that with oil, like it's not like the all you can eat buffet. At a certain point, you're full. And if you smell it, it's usually within 3 to 7 breaths. And suddenly you don't smell it anymore because you're good. You don't need it anymore. And I think a lot of people try to be a value girl. So why would I be diffusing this and going through it more quickly when I could just smell it?
I love that. And it's oftentimes just the whisper that is
Yeah.
all nervous system really needs. And it's just the right amount to communicate safety. I'm safe enough and keep ourselves in the moment and creating that space that you've been talking about. There's some questions around where. So you mentioned that the parasympathetic, you like to put on the vagus nerve behind the ears.
Feel with me. Is all of these reflex points are divots, right? So you're just going to feel behind your earlobe and you're going to feel a little divot. That is where your vagus nerve is the most accessible to the surface. And you can put it on one side, you can put it on both. If you want to know what side to put it on, it's interesting. If you kind of open your mouth and go like, ah, you'll see this little thing. It should go kind of straight up and down. If it goes to one side, that means that the vagus nerve is stronger on that side. So say, don't do it right now, but go in the mirror afterward and go, ah, and you see it kind of pulling this way. That means you're going to want to strengthen the other side to kind of balance it. That is a good one for stress. We also have one called adrenal, which is really good for stress. Adrenal is great for jet lag. And we have this one, circadian rhythm. I like red eyes because I just find them so efficient. And my daughter grew up flying red eyes. My fiance and his children, I'm training. So this one, it's called circadian rhythm. And I put it on the top of the head and above the ears. And then I just learned, I was at a conference and a practitioner came up to me and said, I put it on these reflex points on the ankles. So kind of right above the ankles. And oh my goodness, I love that. Like I did that.
Wonderful. There's some questions around the calming a very active nervous system. For me, it's really about trial and error and seeing how does my body respond to this. Very similar to the somatic exercises. That's why I teach you all so many, because one will be just perfect for one person. And for the other person, they're like, it was okay, but this one over here is what does it for me. And yet you both perhaps have an overactive nervous system. So there's some individuality, and yet there is still some science around cloves and, some of the specific essential oils, rose, that actually there is some specific action that they do take on the body. What would you guide people in terms of which ones to try?
Parasympathetic seems to help most people. The thing that I'm still learning about, I really feel like the nervous system, lymphatic system, and the fascial network are all woven together. And interestingly, when people present that way, fascia really seems to help regulate them. And I like to find the most efficient way to do things. And so my favorite places to apply the fascia oil are before bed in the belly button, the navel with the roller bottle, and then the bottom of the feet. And I learned this from Deanna Hansen, who does block therapy for fascia release. Between the toes, she taught me that obviously the fascia is everywhere, but it kind of starts in the feet and then spirals up. And so if you really get the feet, especially like before bed when your body is resetting and regulating, it's almost like that helps spiral everywhere. And I mentioned I do yoga most days. And so I sometimes put the fascia blend on the bottom of the feet before I start the practice. And I notice yoga engages your entire body, right? But your feet position and kind of how nimble you are really influences your whole body in the pose. It's very different. So those are kind of my two favorite ways to really get myself in the body and almost calm the fascia to then calm. I see fascia as kind of the feminine aspect of the nervous system, and the vagus nerve is the masculine. I think they're married and they work together. So I think when you can kind of harmonize those two aspects, it has a more profound effect.
I love that. And I'll speak from experience that most people that I've worked with, they at least start with the parasympathetic. And as to your point, it works for the majority of people. I have lots of your oils, Jodi, and I will say that the heart has been one of my most favorite recently. And I think it's no surprise with some of the heart stuff that's been coming up with my book and Miguel and those feelings. But when I travel, I can't take everything. And so what gets in my bag is the parasympathetic blend, because no matter where I am, no matter what's going on, that will still help my nervous system and be a direct cue of signal of safety. And so I travel with that one, even though I've got a whole counterful of the others here at home.
This idea of heart coherence, that your heart sends more signals to your brain than anything else. And if your heart is kind of in coherence, then those signals are coherent and then the body responds. Yeah, I've been playing with this idea of, I used to live in New York, right, with all the deadbolts on your door. And if you only lock one of them, you could get broken into, or when you're trying to open the door, you have to undo all of them. This idea that basically the vagus nerve works in combination with the fascia, with the lymph, with the heart, the limbic system. And so when you kind of shift all of these into balance, then you're basically in coherence.
Coherence is what will help us be in our best health and our best selves. We can be afraid that we will fall apart if we let ourselves open up and feel. And coherence allows us to do that safely, to open up gently and at the pace that feels right for our body. In chapter 13 of my book, in fact, on page 184, I talk about microdosing safety, because that is sometimes the place that we need to start, the pace at which we need to start. Thank you, Jodi, for bringing to light this tool of smell that we can use to shift our inner fear and overwhelmed states. We often can take it for granted until we don't have it, or we certainly don't use it with the deliberate intention that we could. I'll have a link to your essential oils in the show notes for those people who want to check that out. I personally have loved them. If this episode resonated with you, my friend, then you will want to check out episode 100, where I share 3 powerful stories, more stories on how to reclaim your mental and physical health through a biology of trauma lens. I'm here to save you time and money by bringing you practical information that will help you accelerate the healing journey. Would you please leave a review? That is one of the most helpful things that you can do for a podcast host. Your feedback helps me bring you great content and helps others find the information that could change their life as well. I'm your host, Dr. Amy. Until next episode, lots of love.